I was living in Palm Desert, and I was playing drums with Fu Manchu, and it was around like 98, 99. And that was when I decided that I wanted to make a record on my own. It was a really big deal for me. I was really nervous. I think a lot of artists go through that, you know, when they want to like kind of like break through within themselves and do something they've never done before. You know, am I going to get clowned? Are people going to take it serious? What if it's lame? You know, and it's like, but that's the challenge, you know. You know, it was something I'd been wanting to do for a while. But it was about that time that I decided, okay, you know, Fu Manchu had gotten home from a tour. We had a break, and I just decided, you know, I was painting houses, you know, the lame day job, you know, I was bumming on that, and I looked at my bro Dave, who we roomed together at that time, and I said, Dave, I'm gonna make a record by myself, and I'm gonna start doing my own trip. I quit my job the next day and took my cash and booked a week's time at Rancho de la Luna up in Joshua Tree. And for the next 3 weeks, I just would hang out in my apartment, and with a 4-track recorder, I would just kind of start dropping grooves and beats and guitar licks, and then I'd dump it to cassette, and I'd put it in my Walkman with the headphones, and I'd ride my bike through the town during sunset to check it out, see how the grooves were, and make sure that it was flowing nice. And I woodshed it and got the whole record all dialed in those 3 weeks, 2, maybe 3 weeks, and then it was time. You know, my time was booked about then, up at the rancho with Fred Drake, who owned the Rancho de la Luna. He booked my time, and I'd worked in sessions with him prior to Jalamanta, and he was going to engineer it, but he wasn't feeling too good, so he got sick and said my friend Tony's going to do it. And I met Tony a couple times through other sessions as well. And Tony Mason was one of the guys that I really related to up in Joshua Tree.
I'd never recorded a record. I was just assisting, and Fred wasn't feeling well, and he said, here, you know, record this record, you know, and I still trip on it because it's like, what an awesome opportunity, what a joy to, you know, work with somebody as laid back as Brant. Fred was a huge influence, obviously, and at one point in his career down in Los Angeles, he and this other friend of his had an opportunity to work with Chad Blake. And up to that point, Fred was like, you know, just learning how to engineer and stuff, I assume. And when he met Chad and they started working with him, Chad Blake turned him on to this idea of recording can be fun. And he said it just changed his world, and it's always stuck with me. You know, yeah, it can be a job or whatever, but I'm not really into that, you know? I mean, what the hell?
We shared a lot of the same musical influences and 70s and rock.
What I was listening to when I was growing up was all the, early 70s records, and so that those drum sounds get like implanted in your brain.
So when it came time to record the record, we instantly were starting from a rad place because we just enjoyed being in the proximity of being in a studio with a small area with a couple people, certainly in this situation where it's just me and him. Like if I didn't jive with the dude, it's gonna be a tough gig.
I was enjoying doing it, and it's what I love, as opposed to recording somebody who might be doing some kind of music that I'm not really into. It was just, once again, in the intimate setting, and honest to God, I was pretty freaking nervous, because it's like, oh, dude, this guy was in Caius, and all this shit, it's like, which is bullshit, whatever, he's awesome, but I think it was, for both of us being comfortable enough to, be able to lay this down.
That chemistry was what allowed it to just flow and be a real natural experience. I'd done enough recording to know that, like, if I was gonna do this, time was important. I had to do it quick. I had limited money, and I knew, I played all the licks and all the beats, and I knew I built the whole thing musically by myself. So I kind of took the 3 weeks to kind of exercise it by myself. And I performed, every track was a performance. I knew what I had to perform. And I would rehearse every track at home on the 4-track. And then because I knew I had to do it by myself.
He had already figured out the songs all in his head, and I don't know if he'd done any 4-track work with it or whatever, but he was really into that. So he would come in and he would play the drums. And honest to God, I was thinking, like, how is he gonna do this? But he totally had it worked out. And, even still, it like amazes me that you could have all that shit in your head and be able to lay that down. Because it seemed like it was always drums first. I don't think, maybe some later records we started with like guitar first, but there was never, no click track or, no shit, and it's just like, is that it? Is that the take? Yeah, boom, once, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to put a bass down or a guitar down. It's like, okay, dude,
I was listening to a lot of jazz, a lot of reggae and Jamaican music. There's one in particular, a Peter Tosh record that I was listening to at the time. That's where I got the idea for just a nice heavy bass, a nice warm foundation.
I'd be all like, dude, we got to turn down the bass. Dude, we got to turn down the bass. Like, no, and he's right. He was totally right. Because what I put up an old Judas Priest record, like a 70s Judas. It's like, boom, there it is. It's there, man. It's in your face, or an old War record, or just anything like that.
And then some nice, semi-clean guitars on top that were just kind of like hitting notes, and jazz. The drums for me was just kind of swinging, just kind of dropping beats, just kind of letting it drop and flow. For me, it's desert. For me, it's just a sound that represents the environment of where I came from, Laid back, it's heavy, there's joy, but it's kind of melancholy. So it's kind of there's like a nice balance of vibe. And that was just something that just, was naturally there. And so I just kind of rolled with that. I had to reinvent my approach to going in a studio. and looking at it more of like a production, an art, you know. I want to paint this kind of picture. I want to present this kind of vibe. I want this song to do that, you know. And I thought of all the songs were important, you know. The whole record was, I had performed and rehearsed the entire record before I went in. I knew what I wanted to capture, you know. I wanted to evolve as a musician, you know, not just a specific drummer or a guy who might write some songs for a band. I wanted to be, you know, musical. I wanted to create more of a vibe. Artist, man. I was an artist before I was a musician. It's very interesting when people, you know, when someone in Iceland will come up to me and say, you know, I love Jalamanta, and it's a really, you know, special record for me, you know. And that's a trip, because it's warm music, and it's coming from a desert. That's where that music is born. But it's also small town music. It's not urban music. It's small town hick music. There's a vibe in that music that's very simple, and it's very approachable. It's not aggressive, and if you come from Nebraska or Iceland or Poland or Australia, there's small towns everywhere.
It's being 14. It's like being not fettered by a bunch of bullshit of like what people tell you how it's supposed to be and how you're supposed to sound. And if you want to get, you know, popular or whatever the fuck, you got to sell your ideas. There really needs to be more shit in this world that reminds me to be myself, you know. I was listening to the CD and I was thinking, like, I wouldn't even touch it.
I was just trying to make a record. I didn't care, and that goes for all, you know, all my music, all my records. I don't care what's happening now, what happened yesterday, what's going to be the hip thing tomorrow. I have no clue. I don't know. You know, it was all about, well, this is just what it is.